Do you think you're better than us now? My dad shouted, then smashed my $2,400 laptop right before my hotel pitch. Leeches like you don't belong here, he yelled. My mom stayed quiet, but I didn't let it slide. Can you imagine your own family sabotaging your every success, tearing down your dreams piece by piece? My entire life, every time I dared to reach for something big, they were right there, waiting to pull me back into the shadows. But nothing could have prepared me for the night my father shattered my future right before my eyes. I still remember clutching those gift bags, my knuckles white, as I walked up the cracked concrete path to my parents' house. It was a warm spring evening, but my stomach was a knot of ice. The familiar smells hit me: Dad's cigarettes, Mom's geraniums. 3 months. 3 long months since I'd visited, and I'd picked out these gifts so carefully, hoping they'd bridge the growing chasm between us. Look who finally remembered where she came from. Dad's voice, rough from his worn recliner, cut through the quiet as I stepped inside. His eyes, always so quick to judge, swept from my pressed slacks to the hotel name badge I'd forgotten to take off. The fancy hotel manager graces us with her presence. Hi, Dad, I forced a smile, the familiar script already playing out. Then Jack appeared from the kitchen, beer in hand, a smirk on his face. 32, still living at home, still following Dad into the steel mill. Nice outfit, he snickered. That polyester blend must really impress the rich folks at your hotel. My fingers tightened around the shopping bag handles, the paper crinkling. I took a slow, deep breath. Family is family, I reminded myself, even when their words cut you to the bone. I brought some things I thought you might like, I said, placing the bags gently on the coffee table. Mom came in then, wiping her hands on a dishcloth, her eyes meeting mine for just a second before darting away. Dad, this is a new insulated work coat for your night shifts. The reviews said it keeps you warm even in freezing temperatures. I handed him the package. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of appreciation in his calloused fingers, but it hardened almost instantly. Mom, I got you that ceramic cookware set you mentioned last Thanksgiving. She took the heavier bag with a hesitant smile. For Jack, I chose a watch, just like the one he'd admired on my wrist months ago. His eyebrows actually rose a little as he opened the box. Then Dad cleared his throat. Hotel money makes you feel rich enough to buy all this? His voice had that familiar, stomach-churning edge. Is that why you never call anymore? Too busy counting your dollars. Heat flooded my face. My heart hammered against my ribs, desperate to escape. Even after all these years, his words still landed with brutal accuracy. Actually, I said, trying to salvage the evening, I have some good news. I was promoted to senior manager last week. I smoothed my slacks, a nervous habit from childhood. It's a significant step up. The silence that followed was deafening. It reminded me of the time I first mentioned college. Dad had thrown his dinner plate into the sink, shattering it. Real workers use their hands, not fancy words, he'd roared. Aunt Annie, though, she'd smiled, pressing a check into my palm. Education is never wasted, she'd whispered, her eyes bright with pride. I looked at Dad now, his jaw tight. Why did every achievement feel like a betrayal in this house? This pattern was so familiar it felt choreographed, my success triggering their hostility. Yet, some stubborn part of me still craved their approval. I thought maybe seeing what the promotion entails might help you understand why it matters to me, I offered, reaching for my laptop bag. It was brand new, bought with my first paycheck advance. 6 easy payments still to go. I put together the renovation proposal that convinced corporate to invest in our property. I opened the sleek silver laptop on the coffee table, careful to avoid the water rings. I wanted to share this with you because it matters to me, I said, keying in my password. This presentation is what I'll be showing potential investors tomorrow. Dad snorted. That fancy computer won't help when that hotel fails. Tourist towns always dry up eventually. My fingers paused on the keyboard. This wasn't just about showing off. This presentation represented weeks of late nights, endless research. My first major project as senior manager depended on this. Mom stood silently by the doorway, her new cookware clutched to her chest, eyes fixed on the floor. She hadn't met my gaze once. Jack leaned forward, setting his unwrapped watch on the table. Still trying to prove you're better than us? Pathetic. The word hung in the air. 3 against 1 in their territory, with my professional future balanced precariously on my lap. "I'm having lunch with Aunt Annie tomorrow to celebrate," I said, my voice steadier than it felt. "She's excited about the promotion." Dad's face darkened at the mention of his sister's name. "My sister always encouraged your foolishness, filled your head with ideas about being something you're not." "Aunt Annie believed in me when no one else did," I replied, carefully closing my laptop and slipping it back into its case. "A small, protective act. She loaned me money for my first semester when you refused." "And look where that got you," Dad muttered, "working for people who'd fire you tomorrow if it saved them $1. I stood up, smoothing my slacks again. "I should go. I have a presentation to prepare." As I gathered my things, I caught Mom's eye for a fleeting moment. Something like regret passed over her face before she looked away. Jack examined his new watch with feigned indifference. Dad stared at the TV as if I'd already left. Walking back to my car, a thought formed with surprising clarity. Maybe they'll never see my value, but others do. The hotel director who championed my promotion. My team who stayed late to help. Aunt Annie, who never doubted me. For the first time, I wondered if that might just be enough. I clutched my laptop to my chest, rising from the sagging couch. The presentation I'd spent weeks perfecting was safely tucked inside the silver case. My future, balanced in my hands. "I should get going," I said, forcing lightness into my voice. "Big day tomorrow." Dad's eyes tracked me as I moved toward the door, his jaw working beneath stubbled skin. Something in his expression shifted, a hardening I'd seen before, but never truly registered. He set his beer on the coffee table with deliberate care. "Wait." His voice stopped me cold. "You think you can just breeze in here after 3 months, drop off some guilt presents, and take off?" My fingers tightened around the laptop. "I'm not trying to. You've always thought you were better than us." Dad rose from his recliner, his frame blocking the path to the door. "With your fancy hotel job and your press clothes." Jack chuckled from the corner. "Those rich folks have her thinking she belongs with them." I glanced at Mom, hoping for an ally, but she just studied the pattern on her new cookware box, fingers tracing the edges. The air in the living room thickened, pressing against my lungs. "Dad, please. I need to prepare for tomorrow. People are counting on me." His laugh came harsh and sudden. "People are counting on me too. At the mill. Doing real work." Before I could respond, he lunged forward. His calloused hands wrapped around my laptop, wrenching it from my grasp with surprising strength. "Dad, what are you doing?" His face twisted with an anger that seemed to have been waiting years for this moment. "You need to know your place. Real work is at the mill." The world slowed. My body froze, unable to process what I was seeing. With a grunt, he raised the laptop above his head. And then he smashed it to the floor. The crack echoed through the room. Metal frame bending. Screen splintering into a web of fractures. The hinge broke free, plastic shards skittering across the worn carpet. I dropped to my knees beside the ruined computer. My presentation. My promotion. My future. "Now you'll learn what real work feels like," Jack said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. A memory surfaced, sharp and suddenly clear, Dad tearing my college application in half when I was 17. My textbooks mysteriously soaked in the bathtub the night before my SATs. My acceptance letter accidentally thrown into the fireplace. This wasn't the first time. This was simply the first time I couldn't deny the pattern. "How could you?" My voice came out steady, surprising me. "This has my entire presentation on it. The hotel is counting on me to deliver this tomorrow." Dad towered over me unmoved. "Hotels come and go. Family is forever." I stared at my shattered laptop. Something shifted inside me. Every achievement in my life had been met with these accidents, this sabotage. Every step forward countered by their relentless attempts to pull me back. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and took several photos of the destroyed laptop. Dad frowned, confusion crossing his face as I documented the damage from multiple angles. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse and removed the receipt for the laptop, 6 payments still pending. I photographed that too, then carefully returned it to my wallet. "Casey." Dad's voice softened, taking on the reasonable tone he used with neighbors. I'm trying to save you from disappointment. That hotel world isn't for people like us. What do you mean, people like us? I asked, gathering the largest pieces of broken plastic and metal. Jack stepped forward, beer still in hand. Dad says they're bringing in machines at the mill. We could lose everything. The confession hung in the air. Fear, not malice, flashed across my father's face. If you fail to, at least we all stay together, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion I rarely heard. Family sticks together. I looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. The lines etched deeper around his eyes, the slight tremble in hands that had worked steel for 30 years, the raw terror of obsolescence. They weren't cartoon villains. They were scared people, making terrible choices. Your father just wants what's best for all of us. Mom finally spoke, her voice small but certain, her loyalty never wavering, even now. I finished collecting the pieces of my computer, placing them carefully into my laptop bag. Each broken fragment represented years of their silent campaign against my independence. I always hoped we could be a real family, I said, standing with as much dignity as I could muster, but I guess I was wrong. Dad's expression faltered. Casey, don't be dramatic, it's just a computer. I turned toward the door, laptop bag clutched against my chest. It's not about the computer. It's about respect. Something I've never gotten in this house. Instead of driving to my apartment, I found myself navigating the familiar streets to Aunt Annie's neighborhood. Her porch light glowed warm against the evening darkness. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Annie took one look at my face and the bag in my arms. Oh, honey, what happened? She asked, pulling me into an embrace that smelled of cinnamon and stability. Inside her kitchen, I spread the broken pieces across her table. Annie listened without interruption as I explained everything. When I finished, she disappeared into her spare room and returned with an old, clunky laptop. It's not fancy, but it works, she said, placing it beside the ruins of mine. They can break things, but they can't break you. I ran my finger along a crack in the screen of my destroyed computer. This isn't about a computer, this is about respect. Annie nodded, her eyes fierce with understanding. Then we better make sure you knock that presentation out of the park tomorrow. For the first time since walking into my parents' house, I felt my shoulders relax. I won't let them take this opportunity from me. No, Annie agreed, squeezing my hand. We won't. I paced the floral carpet in Aunt Annie's living room, my phone clutched against my ear. The clock on her mantel showed 2:13 a.m., but sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. Yes, I understand you're closed, I told the hotel's IT support line, keeping my voice steady despite the panic bubbling inside. I just need to confirm whether my presentation auto-saved before my laptop was damaged. Annie appeared in the doorway, wearing a faded bathrobe, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders. She carried 2 steaming mugs of tea, concern etching deeper lines around her eyes. Good news, I told her after hanging up. Everything's backed up to the company drive. I can access it from any computer. Annie set the tea down with a soft clink. Smart girl. Always prepared. I learned my lesson after what happened to my college application, I said, remembering how that letter mysteriously disappeared years ago. I always back up important work now. Annie sank into her armchair, the springs creaking softly. Your father did similar things to me when we were young, you know? Broke my camera the week before my photography scholarship interview. My stomach tightened. You never told me that. Some family stories are harder to share than others. She sipped her tea. Have you noticed that these accidents always happen right before your big opportunities? The realization landed like a stone. Every major milestone, college acceptance, first apartment lease signing, promotion interviews, all preceded by mysterious mishaps or emergencies demanding my immediate attention and resources. How did I not see it before? My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Annie opened a drawer in the side table and removed a small notebook. Your mother gave me this last Christmas. She said she didn't know what to do with it. I flipped through pages of Mom's neat handwriting, dates, job titles, salary figures. A complete record of my career milestones, carefully maintained in secret. She's been keeping track, I whispered. I think part of her is proud, Annie said. She just can't show it. The weight of this revelation settled over me, but alongside it came a strange sense of clarity. They could break my possessions, but they couldn't erase my achievements or my knowledge. Let's see what we can salvage, Annie said, disappearing into her spare room. She returned with an ancient laptop, bulky and worn, but functioning. They can break things, but they can't break your mind. I powered up the computer, its fan whirring loudly in the quiet house. The screen glowed blue, illuminating Annie's determined face. I'm not just going to deliver this presentation, I said, fingers already flying across the unfamiliar keyboard. I'm going to make it memorable. Annie squeezed my shoulder. That's my girl. We worked through the night recovering files and rebuilding slides. By morning, my eyes burned from exhaustion, but the presentation was better than the original, leaner, more focused, with a narrative that turned obstacles into opportunities. Just before 7 a.m., I saved the final version and closed my eyes for 20 precious minutes of rest. The conference room felt cavernous as I stepped inside, clutching Annie's ancient laptop. 6 board members in tailored suits glanced up from their phones and tablets, eyebrows rising at the outdated machine in my hands. Casey? The hotel director began. Is everything all right with your equipment? Instead of apologizing or making excuses, I set the laptop down firmly on the table and met his gaze. Sometimes obstacles appear right before opportunities, I said, my voice clear and confident. How we handle them defines us. I connected the laptop to the projector with cables Annie found in her attic. The first slide appeared, crisp and professional despite its humble origin. Our hotel stands at a similar crossroads, I continued, moving smoothly into my presentation. We can view budget constraints as limitations or as invitations to innovation. The room shifted. I felt it, attention sharpening, skepticism giving way to curiosity. For the next 20 minutes, I guided them through renovation proposals that emphasized character over cost, uniqueness over uniformity. The old laptop hummed steadily, a reminder of resilience. When I finished, the director closed his portfolio with a decisive snap. I've been on the fence about increasing departmental budgets, he said. Not anymore. Casey, your team gets the first allocation. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket, texts from my parents asking for their monthly bill money, now 3 days late. I silenced it without looking and accepted the congratulations coming from around the table. As the board members filed out, Regina from accounting paused beside me. I don't know how you stayed so calm with that old laptop. I would have been a nervous wreck. I smiled, a genuine one that reached my eyes. It's just a tool. The ideas are what matter. In the lobby, I found hotel staff gathered in small clusters, word of my presentation's success already spreading. The front desk manager offered a thumbs up. The maintenance supervisor, who rarely spoke to anyone, nodded respectfully as I passed. The director caught up to me near the elevators. That was impressive work, Casey, especially given the circumstances. He hesitated. One of the housekeepers mentioned seeing your family in the parking lot yesterday. Is everything okay? It's complicated, I admitted. He studied me for a moment. We value your contributions here. If you need an advance on your bonus for a new computer, just say the word. We invest in people who invest in themselves. Before I could respond, I spotted Aunt Annie waiting by the front entrance, clutching a small bouquet of yellow daisies. I knew you'd knock their socks off, she said, embracing me tightly. Looking over her shoulder, I saw my colleagues watching with approval. These people, my professional family, valued what I brought to the table. They saw me. You should stay with me until things cooled down, Annie said as we walked to her car. My house has always been your house. Sunlight warmed my face as we crossed the parking lot. For the first time in days, I felt light, unburdened. The question that had been haunting me since the night my laptop shattered felt less urgent now. Do I cut ties completely, or give them one more chance to understand what they've done? I didn't need to decide today. With Annie beside me and a workplace that appreciated my value, I had time to consider my next steps carefully. The most important thing I'd learned was that I wasn't alone in this battle. As we pulled away from the hotel, I turned to Annie. Thank you for believing in me. She smiled, eyes on the road ahead. Always have, always will. 3 days after my presentation success, I sat at Aunt Annie's dining room table, surrounded by papers, receipts, and my borrowed laptop. The glow of victory had faded, replaced by something colder and more clinical. I'd traded emotional reactions for methodical planning. I can't make decisions based on hurt feelings, I told Annie as she set a mug of coffee beside my growing stack of documents. This has to be about facts. The table had become my command center. Spreadsheets tracked every bill I'd paid for my parents over the years: electricity, water, internet. Each payment meticulously categorized and dated. My fingers tapped thoughtfully against the wooden surface as I reviewed the numbers. Which of these ties are actually worth preserving? I murmured, creating another column. Some family bonds deserved protection. Others required severing. The distinction needed clear thinking, not sentimentality. Annie leaned over my shoulder, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Your father did the same thing to your mother when she wanted nursing school, she said quietly. Tore up her application the night before it was due. I added this information to my notes, feeling a familiar twist in my stomach. This isn't about punishment, I told her, straightening my shoulders. It's about protection. I pulled up listings for apartments near the hotel. The lease application for a secure building sat half completed on my screen. I need my own sanctuary, I explained when Annie raised an eyebrow. Somewhere they don't have access to. This was a business restructuring, not a family crisis. Every connection required evaluation, financial entanglements, emergency contacts, automatic payments. My hotel training served me well. Crisis management demanded systematic thinking. Annie watched as I documented years of financial support. You've been paying their bills since your first management position, she observed, pointing to the spreadsheet. 3 years of utilities. Plus groceries and Jack's car insurance, I added, scrolling through bank statements. The evidence built, row after organized row. I needed to understand exactly what I'd been contributing to make informed decisions about what stopped. I created a separate folder for communications with HR. My payroll deposits needed redirection. Emergency contacts required updating. Not confrontation, but preparation. When Annie mentioned my father's pattern of sabotage extending back decades, I noted that too. Historical context mattered when establishing boundaries. What about your credit reports? Annie asked, bringing more coffee. Already contacted monitoring services, I replied, showing her the confirmation email. And I've started researching apartment security systems. My focus narrowed to this single goal: comprehensive independence, not revenge. Protection. The spreadsheet calculating my total financial contributions to my parents' household grew more detailed. 3 years of support quantified in dollars and cents. Annie squeezed my shoulder. You've always been the responsible one. Time they learn what that means. The phone rang, interrupting our strategy session. Annie answered, her expression tightening as she listened. You'd better come see this, she said, handing me the receiver. 10 minutes later, I stood at my office window overlooking the hotel lobby. My parents were arguing with the receptionist, their voices rising. Dad pounded his fist on the counter while Mom clutched her purse, scanning the area for me. They're looking for you, my director said, appearing beside me. Something about missing bill payments? My stomach clenched. This was a new level of threat. They'd brought their manipulation to my workplace. Their willingness to jeopardize my professional reputation showed they remained formidable opponents. Security approached them with calm professionalism. I watched as my father's face reddened, his finger jabbing toward the elevators that led to the management offices. Mom's tears seemed calculated from this distance, perfectly timed to draw sympathy from the growing audience of guests. Should we call police? The director asked, concern evident in her voice. No, I responded, straightening my blazer. Security can handle it. I've dealt with difficult guests before. But these weren't guests. These were the people who raised me, now being escorted from the building that represented everything I'd built for myself. I watched until they disappeared through the glass doors, my father's angry gestures visible until he reached their car. The tension in my shoulders remained, but something else grew stronger. They can't take this from me either, I thought. turning back to my desk where another apartment listing awaited my review. The strategy continued, the preparation deepened, and my resolve hardened with every calculated step. The apartment key felt substantial in my palm as I unlocked the door to my new place, 3 weeks after the laptop incident. I'd secured a second-floor unit with a security desk downstairs, key fob access after hours, a feature I'd specifically sought out. "That's the last box," Annie said, setting down a container labeled "kitchen" on the countertop. Her silver-streaked hair caught the late afternoon sunlight streaming through windows I'd already covered with privacy film. "You travel light for someone who's been in one place so long." "I only brought what matters," I replied, surveying the sparse living room. A second-hand couch, a coffee table, and my new laptop on a small desk comprised the entirety of my furniture. What was missing spoke volumes. No family photos, no inherited keepsakes, no Christmas ornaments handmade in elementary school. I opened my notebook where I'd methodically tracked every step of my independence strategy. Each completed task received a firm checkmark, bank accounts transferred, automatic payments to my parents' household canceled, mail forwarded, phone number changed, social media privacy settings strengthened. The list stretched across 3 pages. Annie watched me add another check. "You're treating this like one of your hotel renovation projects." "It's essentially the same thing. Assess the damage, create a realistic plan, and rebuild stronger." I closed the notebook. This isn't about burning bridges. It's about building boundaries they can't cross without my permission. Later that evening, I sat cross-legged on the floor unpacking books when my new phone buzzed with a notification. My stomach tightened. An old habit, but it was just an email confirmation of my credit monitoring service activation. The laptop incident had taught me one critical lesson: protect everything. After shelving the last book, I opened my laptop to review tomorrow's schedule. The screen reflected my face, composed and focused. 3 months ago, I would have been watching my phone for texts from home, wondering if I should call to check on Mom. Now, that compulsion had faded like an old bruise. Annie appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea. "Have you thought about what you'll say when they finally realize you've stopped paying their bills?" The question settled between us. I'd practiced this conversation a dozen times with Annie, rehearsing calm responses to the inevitable accusations. "I'll tell them the truth, that I can't financially support people who deliberately sabotage my career," I said, accepting the steaming mug. "Then I'll end the conversation if they can't respect that." "You make it sound so simple." Annie sat beside me on the floor, her knees crackling softly. "Not simple. Necessary." I blew across the surface of my tea. We both know this was never just about a laptop. The next morning, I stepped out of the shower to find my phone vibrating against the bathroom counter. My mother's name appeared on the screen, the first contact in 3 weeks. I answered on the 4th ring. "Casey?" Mom's voice wavered. "The power company called. They said you canceled the automatic payments. Our electricity gets shut off tomorrow if we don't pay." Her words tumbled out between sniffles. "What's happening? Why are you doing this to us?" My rehearsed response evaporated as something in her tone caught me off guard. Not anger, but genuine confusion, as if my actions were completely unprovoked. "Mom, after what happened with my laptop and presentation?" "Your father's been so upset," she interrupted. "He told everyone you've abandoned us. Your cousin Vicky called to ask what she could do to help. The whole family thinks you've turned your back on us." The revelation hit like cold water. They were rewriting history, casting me as the villain in a story where I was the one betrayed. My father wasn't just trying to control me. He was working to control how our entire extended family saw me. I gripped the edge of the sink, steadying myself. "That's not what happened, Mom. He says you care more about your fancy job than your struggling family," she continued. "That we sacrificed everything for your education, and now you won't help when the mill's closing." The strategy came into focus with brutal clarity. My independence plan addressed financial and physical boundaries, but I never considered they'd attack my reputation within the family. This wasn't just about escaping their control, it was about preserving the truth. After ending the call, I opened my laptop and began typing an email addressed to my extended family. The subject line read, "What actually happened?" Aunt Annie found me still writing an hour later, documenting years of sabotage with dates, events, and consequences. I thought I just needed to protect myself, I told her, my eyes fixed on the screen. But they're turning everyone against me. I need to protect the truth, too. Annie read over my shoulder, her hand resting lightly on my back. You've done everything you can to be fair. Sometimes the hardest part isn't standing up for yourself, it's standing up to the stories others tell about you. I saved the draft, knowing tomorrow I'd proofread it one final time before sending. The apartment felt quieter than ever as night fell, but my resolve had never been stronger. It's time, I told Annie as she prepared to leave. I've changed my accounts, secured my home, documented everything. I'm ready to face them on my terms, not theirs. Annie hugged me tightly. Then that's what you'll do. As I closed the door behind her, I realized I'd built more than just a physical fortress. I'd constructed an emotional one too, not to hide within, but to stand upon as I fought for my truth. 3 days later at work, I spotted them the moment the lobby doors slid open. My father's weathered hands clutched his best hat, the one reserved for funerals and loan applications. My mother stood beside him in her church dress, the pale blue one with a white collar that made her look smaller than her 5'4" frame. Jack hovered behind them, uncomfortable in a button-down shirt I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. 3 days of strategic preparation evaporated in an instant. There she is, my father announced, his voice booming across the marble floor. Several guests turned. My colleague Marcus raised an eyebrow from behind the reservation desk. Our hotel manager daughter. The words sounded wrong coming from him, proud instead of mocking. I froze between the potted palms that flanked our reception area, momentarily trapped between my professional world and the family invasion force. Casey, honey, my mother said, stepping forward with arms outstretched. We've been trying to reach you. I managed to keep my face neutral, despite the alarm bells screaming in my head. This wasn't a reconciliation attempt. This was an ambush. I'm in the middle of my shift, I said, my voice steady. Did you need something urgent? My father swept his arm around my mother's shoulders, presenting a united front. Is that any way to greet your folks? We just wanted to invite you to Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family's coming, Uncle Jim, Aunt Denise, even your cousins from Buffalo. The trap became clear. If I refused in front of my colleagues, I'd appear cold and heartless. If I accepted, I'd surrendered the boundaries it took days to establish. Mr. Miller? My heart nearly stopped as Daniel Peterson, the hotel director, approached with hand extended. I recognize you from the photos in Casey's office. Wonderful to finally meet you. My father transformed, shoulders squaring as he took Daniel's hand. The pleasure's all mine. Just wanted to see where my daughter works her magic. I watched in horror as my carefully separated worlds collided. Daniel beamed, completely unaware of the psychological warfare unfolding in his lobby. Casey's been instrumental in our recent renovation project, Daniel said. The board was extremely impressed with her presentation. That's our girl, my mother chimed in, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Always the smart one in the family. Jack stepped forward, completing their formation. We're really proud of her, he added, with enough sincerity to convince anyone who didn't know better. Daniel turned to me, genuine warmth in his expression. You never mentioned your family was stopping by today. It was meant to be a surprise, my father said before I could respond. His eyes met mine, challenging. The steel mill's closing. We need you now more than ever. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The medical bills have been piling up, and with the utilities, her voice broke perfectly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Marcus and Eliza at the front desk exchanged glances. 2 guests lingered near the brochure stand, openly eavesdropping. My father lowered his voice for maximum dramatic effect. We thought Thanksgiving would be a good chance to talk about everything. Everyone's asking why you haven't returned our calls. The weight of public perception settled on my shoulders. I could feel judgment forming in the small crowd of onlookers, the devoted daughter abandoning her struggling family. I took a steadying breath, my mind racing through options. This was exactly the scenario Annie and I had prepared for, but I hadn't expected it so soon. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but that would only surrender my professional territory. Why don't we continue this conversation somewhere more private? I gestured toward the small conference room off the main lobby. My office is being painted today. Relief flickered across Daniel's face as he nodded encouragement. My father hesitated, clearly preferring the public stage, but my mother touched his arm. That sounds lovely, dear. As we crossed the lobby, I caught Jack whispering to my father. Their strategic coordination made my skin crawl. This wasn't a spontaneous visit, it was a calculated operation designed to undo everything I'd built. Casey, a familiar voice called from the entrance. Aunt Annie strode through the sliding doors, waving a paper bag. You forgot your lunch again. I swear you'd forget your head if it wasn't attached. Our prearranged signal. Annie's forgotten lunch appearance meant she'd spotted my family's car in the parking lot. The cavalry had arrived. My father's jaw tightened at the sight of his sister. Annie locked eyes with me, her brief nod confirming she understood the situation. Annie, my mother said stiffly. What a surprise. Monica, Annie's smile remained pleasant as she handed me the bag. Charles, Jack, the whole Miller clan out on the town. Daniel watched this exchange with growing awareness. His eyes tracked between my father's rigid posture and Annie's protective stance beside me. Mr. Peterson, I said quietly, pulling my phone from my pocket. Could I show you something quickly before we go into the conference room? While my family exchanged tense pleasantries with Annie, I pulled up the photos of my shattered laptop. This is what I'm dealing with, I whispered, swiping through the images. This is why I needed to borrow equipment for the presentation. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, to controlled anger. He studied the photos, then looked at my father with new eyes. I see, he said simply, but his tone had changed entirely. We reached the conference room door. Inside waited the moment I'd been preparing for since the night my laptop shattered on my parents' living room floor. After you. I held the door as my family filed in. Annie took position near the entrance, a silent guardian. Daniel followed, now an informed witness rather than an unwitting pawn in my family's game. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath before following them in. Everything in my life had led to this confrontation. The strategic preparations of the past days, the boundaries I'd established, the support network I'd cultivated, all of it converged in this moment. My heart pounded against my ribs as I stepped through the doorway. Jack smirked from his seat at the conference table. My mother arranged her features into a mask of maternal concern. My father stood at the head of the table, already claiming territory. Annie caught my eye as I closed the door behind me. Casey has something important to say, she announced, her voice calm but firm. The door clicked shut. There was no going back now. I stood in the hotel conference room, my back straight as a steel beam, watching my father try to charm my director. The room, normally a place of professional triumph for me, felt electrified with tension. Charles Miller always knew how to present himself to strangers. Warm smile, firm handshake, concerned eyes, the perfect facade. We're just worried about Casey, my father said, his voice carrying that well-practiced note of paternal concern. The mill's closing after 40 years, 200 families without income. Times like these, family needs to stick together. Director Phillips nodded sympathetically, though I caught his eyes flicking toward me, gauging my reaction. Jack stood by the window, arms crossed. Mom clutched her purse, eyes downcast, but occasionally darting around the room. They'd positioned themselves strategically, Dad as the reasonable patriarch, Mom as the worried matriarch, Jack as the dutiful son. Aunt Annie slipped through the door, right on schedule with my forgotten lunch, our prearranged signal. She took a seat beside me, her hand briefly touching mine under the table. The simple gesture steadied me. I understand family concerns, Director Phillips said, but I'm confused why this required interrupting Casey during work hours. My father leaned forward, elbows on the table. Our daughter has stopped answering our calls. Canceled our utilities without warning. We're worried she's under too much stress with this new promotion. My pulse quickened, but I didn't flinch. A week ago, that accusation would have sent me spiraling into apologetic explanations. Not today. Perhaps we should hear from Casey, Phillips suggested, turning to me. I opened the folder I'd prepared for this exact moment. 3 months of methodical documentation spread before me. My throat tightened, but I pushed through. Director Phillips, I'd like to explain why I've needed to establish certain boundaries with my family. My voice emerged stronger than expected. These are photos of my laptop the night before our investment presentation. I slid the first set of photos across the table, the smashed screen, the bent frame, the broken hinge. My father destroyed this laptop when I tried to share news of my promotion. The words hung in the air. It wasn't the first time. When I received my college acceptance letter, my textbooks disappeared. When I earned my first management position, my car mysteriously developed engine problems the morning of my first day. My father's face reddened. I'm not finished, I said, my voice level but firm, a tone I'd practiced with Annie for weeks. For the past 8 years, I've paid the utilities at my parents' house while trying to build my own career. I've provided financial support while receiving, I tapped the photos, this kind of support in return. Jack shifted uncomfortably by the window. Mom stared at her hands. Charles. Annie spoke up, her voice soft but steady. You did the same thing to me when I got that photography scholarship. You broke my camera the night before my portfolio was due. You did it to Monica when she wanted nursing school. You're doing it to Casey now. My father's jaw tightened. Annie, this is family business. Yes, it is, I interrupted, sliding the next document forward. This is a record of every payment I've made toward my parents' household expenses while putting myself through college and building my career. Director Phillips studied the spreadsheet, his eyebrows rising slightly. This is substantial support, Casey. The final document, I continued, extracting a manila folder, contains copies of emails from my mother asking for bill money, sent the same day my laptop was destroyed. I turned to face my parents directly. You can't claim I abandoned you when I've been financially supporting you for years, even after you tried to sabotage my career. The room fell silent. My father's confident posture had vanished, replaced by a rigid stillness. Jack stared out the window, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Only my mother met my gaze, tears welling in her eyes, not the calculated ones she arrived with, but something raw and unplanned. Director Phillips cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, are you aware that destroying someone else's property is a crime? We could press charges for the laptop incident alone. My father's face drained of color. That's not necessary, Casey misunderstood. I understand perfectly, I cut in. You've spent years making sure I failed so you wouldn't have to face your own fears about the changing economy. You needed me to validate your choices by failing alongside you. But that's not love, Dad, that's control. The director stood, his decision visible in his posture. This behavior is completely unacceptable in any family. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you all to leave the premises immediately. You can't just, my father began, but Phillips continued. Any further disruption to my staff will involve security. Casey is one of our most valuable employees, and I won't tolerate this kind of interference with her professional life. My father's face transformed. The mask of reasonable concern crumbled, revealing the tightly controlled fury beneath. His fingers curled into fists, then released. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might overturn the table. But instead, he took a shuddering breath, desperately trying to maintain his composure. Jack finally turned from the window. His expression stunned me, shock, as if he never expected consequences to actually materialize. As if the pattern we'd lived with for decades was supposed to continue without challenge. Casey, my mother whispered, we need you. The mill is really closing. I really looked at her, and saw the woman who watched silently all those years, never intervening. I know, Mom. But needing me doesn't give you the right to destroy what I've built. Phillips moved toward the door, a clear signal this meeting was ending. My father stood, shoulders rigid with barely contained rage. Jack followed, looking less certain than when they arrived. I'll always be your daughter, I told them as they prepared to leave, but I won't be your victim. When you're ready to respect me and my choices, we can talk again. But not until then, and never here at my workplace. As they filed out, Annie's hand found mine again. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. You stood up for yourself like I never could, she whispered. Director Phillips watched the door close behind my family before turning to me. Those who tear others down reveal more about themselves than their targets, he said. Your presentation after that laptop incident showed me exactly who you are, Casey. This just confirms it. The room felt different once they were gone, lighter somehow, as if gravity itself had recalibrated. I expected to feel hollowed out, maybe even grief-stricken, but instead, there was a calm certainty. For the first time since leaving home, I'd set the terms for my life instead of reacting to theirs. Are you okay? Annie asked. I considered the question carefully. The bridge to my childhood was burning behind me, but ahead lay something I'd never fully experienced before: freedom without guilt. I think I will be, I answered, gathering my documents. For the first time, I think I really will be. I clutched my coffee mug tighter as the hotel director slid a certificate across her polished desk. Employee of the Quarter shone in embossed gold lettering beneath my name. The board was particularly impressed with how you handled everything last week, she said, leaning back in her chair. Not many people could deliver a flawless presentation after a family crisis, let alone manage the confrontation with such professionalism. My fingers traced the edge of the frame. 3 weeks since the conference room showdown, and I still woke up some mornings half expecting to find myself back in my parents' house, diminished and desperate for their approval. Thank you, I said, the words still feeling new in my mouth. Before, I'd have deflected, minimized my achievement. Now I let the recognition settle, a small weight balancing the heavier ones I'd carried. The staff's talking about it, you know, she continued. Not the drama. Your composure. The way you stood your ground. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. That kind of leadership can't be taught. Outside her window, tourists strolled along the hotel's manicured path. I spotted a father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders, her small hands gripping his forehead for balance. Something twisted inside me, but the pain felt distant now, like an old injury that only ached before rain. Have you heard from them? She asked. I shook my head. They left town the day after. Jack texted once to say the mill officially closed last week. I set my mug down. I think it's better this way. What I didn't tell her was how much lighter I felt. How I'd slept through the night for the first time in years. How decisions came easier without the weight of anticipated disapproval. That evening, Annie waited for me on her front porch, 2 glasses of lemonade sweating on the small table between rocking chairs. Our Tuesday tradition, now officially marked in both our calendars. I made the appointment, I told her, settling into the familiar creak of the rocker. The therapist you recommended had an opening next week. Annie nodded, satisfaction warming her face. Good. Understanding those patterns will help, Casey. Some wounds need more than time. I sipped my lemonade, tart and sweet on my tongue. I updated my emergency contacts at work today. Put your name at the top. Her hand found mine, squeezed once. About time. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped lower, painting her azaleas in golden light. A car backfired down the street, and I noticed I didn't flinch anymore. You know, Annie says after a while, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who believes in you, I finished, and we clinked our glasses together. 8 months later, I stand in the hotel's largest conference room, watching my team arrange chairs for tomorrow's regional meeting. The morning light streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating faces that look to me for guidance without fear. Maria, can you check that the catering order includes the vegetarian options? My voice carries with easy authority, no more second-guessing, no more seeking permission to lead. Already confirmed, Miss Miller. She smiles, clipboard tucked against her chest. And the welcome packets are ready for your review. Where there was once a constant hum of anxiety, I now find a steady rhythm of confidence. My morning ritual has transformed, a gratitude journal replacing desperate emails, checking if my achievements were acceptable. 3 pages every morning, listing small victories and unexpected joys. The Anderson Group arrives at noon, I tell my team. Let's make sure everything's perfect. Perfect. A word I once feared, a standard I could never reach. Now it's simply a direction, not a destination. After work, I drive to the community center where I volunteer weekends teaching financial literacy. The session started as a way to fill lonely evenings, but evolved into something more meaningful, a chance to help others avoid the dependencies that trapped my parents. My phone buzzes as I pull into my driveway. To my house, 3 blocks from Annie's. No more monthly payments supporting parents who undermined me. The mortgage statement feels like freedom each time it arrives. The text comes from a number I haven't seen in months. Jack, can we meet? I need to talk to you. I consider ignoring it, then remember my therapist's words about chosen engagement versus avoidance. I type back. Coffee shop on Elm. Tomorrow at 4. Jack arrives 10 minutes early, hands fidgeting with his paper cup. 8 months have thinned his face, added lines around his eyes. When he spots me, he straightens, uncertainty replacing the smugness I remember. Thanks for coming, he says as I slide into the seat across from him. What's going on, Jack? I keep my voice neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. He stares into his coffee. Dad's sick. His lungs. All those years at the mill. His voice trails off, and I wait, letting him fill the silence. The old me would have jumped to fix things, offer money, solutions, anything to earn approval. I'm sorry to hear that, I say finally, meaning it while maintaining my boundaries. Jack looks up, surprise flashing across his face. That's it? No lecture about karma. Would that help anyone? I ask. Something shifts in his expression. I started working at Uncle Mike's garage, he offers. Taking night classes too. Mechanical engineering. My eyebrows rise. That's great, Jack. Really? I wanted to study archaeology when we were kids, he admits, his voice lower. Never told anyone. Dad would have exploded. He rotates his cup slowly. When you chased your goals, I was jealous. But I also admired you. Should have said that instead of. He gestures vaguely, encompassing all the cruel words, the laughter as my laptop shattered. We talk for an hour. Not about reconciliation with our parents, those bridges remain ashes, but about his tentative steps toward his own identity. About possibilities. About choices. Family can be the ones who wound you deepest, I tell him as we stand to leave, but they can also change. And if they don't, he asks, then you build something new. I gesture to the window, where Annie waits in her car, pretending not to watch us. My chosen family, my safety net. Jack nods slowly. Maybe we could talk again. Sometime. On my terms, I clarify. Not theirs. Understood. I watch him walk away, shoulders straighter than I remember. The real power, I realize, lies in choosing to live true to yourself. If your family destroyed your career tools and tried to hold you back, would you forgive them later or cut ties for good? I'm still deciding, but at least now it's my choice to make.